Have you ever heard a laugh that lingered with you? Not because it was happy, but because it held a challenge that you couldn't shake. A laugh that pronounced, "You can't do it," before you even attempted it. Life has the ability to present us with those moments that try our mettle. And this tale, my friend, is about one such moment. It starts in a small Texas town, on a hot summer day filled with the scent of dust and diesel fuel, in a small automobile repair shop where the only music was the purring of old motors. Imagine this, a city man as sharp as a razor, emerging from a car that shone like money in your pocket. He had it all: education, success, bravado that filled a room like smoke. And facing him was another man, in every sense: no suit, no eloquence, calloused hands, grease-stained shirt, and a strength the city man could not discern. What came next? A joke, a wager, words flung about like stones on water, intended to ripple and disappear, but instead, they sank low and awakened something deep and strong. Now, let me ask you, has someone ever looked at you and believed you to be less, only to discover they had no idea of the fire within you? That is what this is all about. It is not about an engine that would not start, or a wager that made a joke of itself. It is about pride and humility, about determination and respect, about two men who began as strangers on either side of life and came to teach one another things neither would ever forget. But first, let me take you there. Let me take you through the day when a wrecked truck turned from mere metal and bolts into something more, a bridge between two hearts, and the catalyst for a tale nobody in that town would ever tire of speaking about. Because sometimes, my friend, the things we believe are dead, the engines, the dreams, even people's trust in each other, just need the right hands to revive them. So stick with me, steer with me into that store, feel the warmth of the Texas sun, listen to the clatter of tools, and hear for the sound that altered it all. Not the rumble of an engine, but the laughter echo that began it all. Have you ever seen a moment so daring, so unthinkable, that you knew that life would never be the same thereafter? Well, let me take you back to a quiet Texas town, on a day when the summer heat hung heavy in the air, and the sound of crickets mixed with the faint hum of passing cars on the highway. Because this story, oh, this one will make you stop and think about pride, promises, and the power of determination. Imagine this, a small dusty auto repair garage, straddling the outskirts of town, its metal rooftop glinting under the blistering heat, the smell of grease and oil hanging in the air like a forgotten memory. And in that garage stood a man named Jacob. Jacob was not wealthy, he was not well known, but what he did have was two calloused hands, years of experience, and a hidden sort of strength that caused people to trust him. He'd repaired engines for farmers, for truckers, for whomever required him, and never spoke of it. He was the sort of fellow who allowed his work to be his testament. But that certain morning, existence had a surprise in store for him unlike any other. The door opened, and in strode Henry Parker, a man from the city, an engineer by profession, groomed from top to bottom, dressed in a starched white shirt, and an air of confidence that filled the room before saying a word. Henry was the type of guy who thought that money could cure all, and when he saw Jacob, there in his grease-stained overalls, Henry didn't see a man to be respected. He saw a man to be made fun of. He came in, that air of attitude, and behind him was a truck. Oh no, just any truck. A beat-up, broken-down engine that seemed more dead than alive. Henry rested against the doorway, smiled to himself, and spoke a bit too loudly for the entire shop to hear, words that would turn it all around. "You think you can repair this engine? Fix it, and I'll marry you myself." And then he laughed. Oh, he laughed so forcefully. The laughter reverberated off those worn shop walls and caused even the suspended tools to tremble a bit. Shoppers in the store laughed uneasily. Some of them even smiled because they reasoned, certainly, this had to be a joke, a light-hearted tease. But Jacob, he didn't laugh. He didn't even smile. Rather, he methodically dried his hands on a rag, glared at Henry eyeball to eyeball, and in a voice tranquil, but with enough depth to slice through the din, "You'll regret saying that." And with that, the mood shifted. The laughter stopped, and you could have sensed the gravity of those words landing in the air. Now let me ask you this. Has anybody ever doubted you so much, laughed at you like you're nothing, and inside you knew, this is the time I show them otherwise? That's what was going on right there. The pride in Henry's eyes collided with Jacob's quiet fire, and in that small shop, In that one moment, a wager was made, a wager no one believed would ever come into play, but oh, it was going to alter two lives forever. Now, here's the hook that has you leaning in. Henry was no ordinary man. He was the best in his business, a man who built engines, a man who wrote books on machinery, and here he was wagering against some small-town mechanic because he figured this engine, this hunk of a truck, couldn't be salvaged by anyone, certainly not Jacob. But you know what happens to life when someone's heart is underestimated. It sets the stage for something big, and let me tell you, this wasn't just about fixing an engine anymore. This was about respect, about pride, about a man standing tall when the world thought he couldn't. So, what do you think happened next? Did Jacob walk away? Did he let the laughter echo in his ears and swallow his pride? Or did he grab his wrench and say, "This is my fight"? Oh, keep on listening, because this tale is just getting underway, and believe me, you won't believe where it ends. Have you ever met a man so confident in himself that he thought no one and nothing could ever make him wrong? That was Henry Parker. Failure wasn't an option in his life, and neither was being outwitted. Henry was no ordinary man. He was the man. Educated from the best schools, dressed in suits so crisp that they would cut glass behind wheels of cars that turned heads on every corner. In his head, he was the kind of individual who always emerged victorious. And then Jacob, a man from the other side of the tracks. He didn't attend college. He didn't have wealth or glory. What he did have was strong hands, a keen mind, and something you can't purchase on a paycheck: unadulterated grit. Now, I'll tell you why Henry made this joke. He regarded Jacob, standing before him in his oil-stained overalls, and thought, what is this man possibly going to know that I don't? That's why he laughed. That's why he uttered those words. Because pride, oh, pride blinds. And Henry was soon going to find that out the hard way. The truck in question, it was an ancient Ford pickup, older than most memories in said shop. Its engine wasn't just busted, it was finished, dead, wires charred like black string, pistons tighter than a safe. And even Henry, yes, the big city engineer, had looked at it and said, this thing needs to go to a junkyard. That's why he was so certain Jacob couldn't do it. That's why he smirked when Jacob simply wiped his hands on a rag, drew up a wooden stool, and said, in that calm voice of his, leave it here, I'll call you when it runs. Did you hear that? When it runs, not if. Jacob had faith in something Henry could hardly dream of. Henry shook his head, still grinning, and muttered under his breath, good luck, you'll need a miracle. But here's the thing about life. It has a way of humbling the proud and lifting up the quiet ones, and this, my friend, was going to be one of those times. Jacob got to work that very night. No shiny equipment, no high-tech machinery, no specialist crew like Henry had done before. Only a man, skilled in his head, and an old metal box his dad had left him years ago, the same box that had gained a lifetime's confidence in that small town. Day became night, and night became day, and still Jacob labored on. His hands clicked as clockwork, his eyes keen, his head firm. People began to stop by the store, intrigued by this wild wager everybody was speculating about. Some stood against the doorway, nodded, and whispered, he's lost his mind. That engine is dead as a doornail. But others, the people who knew Jacob, the people who had witnessed him perform miracles in the past, they said something else. They told him, if anyone can do it, it's Jacob. And let me stop right there for a minute and ask you something. What would you place your trust in? Posh degrees and bombast, or talent, hard work, and a man who doesn't know the meaning of quitting? That's really what this story is all about. See, each time that engine wouldn't fire up again, each time the bolts couldn't be moved or the metal couldn't be coerced, Jacob could have given up. He could have said, maybe Henry was right. But that wasn't Jacob's style. No, sir. He labored more. He pushed harder. He kept moving when everyone else would have stopped. And why? Because this wasn't about just a truck anymore. This was about proving something. About demonstrating that true value isn't in the title or the salary. It's in holding on. And oh, there was more too. Every time Jacob considered giving up, he thought of the laughter. The clear, ringing tone of Henry's laughter, bouncing off those shop walls like a challenge. That laugh turned into fuel. It turned into fire.
and that flame burned within Jacob's eyes. Each time he grasped a wrench, days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and yet still, he persisted. He replaced, bit by bit, what was damaged, patched what was rent, and repaired what the rest of them had abandoned as a lost cause. Piece by piece, bolt by bolt, he resurrected that engine from the dead, and the entire time, the town observed. A few of them came in to lend a hand, the rest just came to talk. But everybody knew something big was brewing, because when a man won't give up on something, everybody else says is impossible.
Well, you can be sure that tale's going to last years. So I want to ask you, what do you reckon's stronger, a man's pride or another man's resolve? Stick with me, because this wager, this challenge begun in jest, is going to become something Henry Parker never anticipated. Have you ever waited for a moment so long, worked for it so hard, that when it finally arrived, the entire world seemed to catch its breath with you? That was Jacob's life for the next 3 weeks. Day by day, he dwelled in that small garage, his shirt drenched with sweat, his hands greased with grime, and his mind aflame with one thought: I will get this engine to run. With every dawn rising, Jacob stood before the first light touched the horizon. With every sunset, he remained standing, bent over that old Ford like a surgeon fighting to save a life. They visited the shop, now more than ever, skeptical faces peering through the doorway, murmuring, observing. Some arrived with arms crossed, smirking, willing to say, "Told you so." Others arrived with coffee and muted support, because secretly, they wanted Jacob to succeed. And amidst it all, one noise never left Jacob's head: Henry's laughter. That bitter, taunting laughter that echoed in his ears each time the engine sputtered and stalled. Oh, that laughter wasn't a memory, it was gasoline. It drove him through the nights when his own hands hurt so much he could hardly hold a wrench. It propelled him forward, when all rational thought dictated that he should give up. And then at last, after hundreds of hours, hundreds of bolts, and hundreds of prayers muttered into the emptiness of that workshop, Friday morning dawned. The day of reckoning. Jacob wiped his hands on a greasy rag, his heart thumping in his chest like a drum. The engine rested there shining, no longer a hulk of rust and shattered hope, but a machine revived. Each spot scrubbed, each wire repaired, each inch handled by hands that wouldn't quit. He made a final check of the fuel line, tugged the last bolt snug as it would go, and then slowly, almost in reverence, he got into the driver's seat. The key was heavy in his palm, not metal alone, but a representation of all he had struggled for. He slipped it into the ignition, turned it, and then, quiet. For one gasping instant, the world froze. You could have heard a pin fall on that dusty floor. Jacob's heart pounded. Was this it? Had all this effort been wasted? But then, oh then it did. A cough, a splutter, and then vroom. The engine burst into life, loud and proud, like a lion shaking off its chain. The noise wasn't noise, it was triumph, it was redemption. Customers in the diner a block away set down their coffee cups and fled, faces aglow with amazement and incredulity. Neighbors were running, children yelling, old men doffing their hats to witness what no one believed could happen. That old truck, previously written off as being dead, was back to life, exhaling fire and energy, like the day it rolled off the assembly line for the first time. And there in the center of it all was Jacob, his face smeared with perspiration, his shirt stuck to him, but his grin, oh that grin could have illuminated the entire town. He wiped his sweat-drenched forehead, leaned against the doorframe of a shop, and with the equanimity of a man who just committed a deed, he uttered 2 words that electrified that crowd: "Call Henry." And you know what? Word gets around quick in small town, quicker than the wind on the plain. By the time the hour was over, Henry's sleek black car had parked in the shop yard. He emerged, still carrying that air of confidence, but when his gaze met that truck, the expression on his face altered. His jaw sagged, his arms fell to his side, and for the first time in a long time, Henry Parker had no words. He circled the truck slowly like a dreamer, his fingers tracing the newly polished hood, his eyes welling up with incredulity. And then, almost in a whisper, he said, "Impossible." Jacob leaned against the door, still grinning. That was no loud grin, no proud grin. It was the softly triumphant smile of a man who had never lost faith himself. And then, in the same measured tone he'd used 3 weeks before, Jacob spoke up. "You told me, if I repaired it, you'd marry me." The words caught in the air, suspended like a hammer ready to drop. Henry blinked in surprise. He laughed. Oh, not the braying, scornful laugh of the earlier moment. No, this laugh was anxious, on the verge of being unsteady, as if the man were attempting to shake off the gravity of his own vow. But the crowd wasn't laughing. "No, sir," they recalled, every word. "And here's something you might want to know about small town. They don't forget. Not bets, not vows, not brash boasts made in pride." And now everyone was waiting to see what Henry would do. Would he keep his word? Or would he walk away and bear the blot of broken pride forever? And I'll ask you this, when pride gets its comeuppance, what follows? Oh, hang with me, because what happens after this moment, you won't believe it. Have you ever witnessed a proud man forced to a turning point, where each decision would redesign his life? That's precisely where Henry Parker found himself that day, gazing at that aged truck, humming like a new kitten, a vehicle he promised would never draw breath again. The smile that flowed so readily from his mouth was now absent, his place replaced by a hush, as heavy as you could almost hear the snapping pride. Henry had only two choices in that moment: leave and have the entire town talk about how he abandoned his own speech, or swallow that pride and keep a promise he made when he believed the game belonged to him. And let me tell you something, keeping a promise when it's easy, anyone can do that. Keeping it when your pride is involved, that requires something greater than ego. Henry met Jacob's gaze, and for the first time since they met, his eyes were not arrogant. That day, they were full of respect, perhaps something more. Because in that moment, Henry did not see more than a grease-stained mechanic in overalls. He was a man with grit etched in his bones, a man who didn't merely repair engines, he rebuilt hope, piece by piece, with hands that refused to quit. So Henry drew in a slow breath, his voice low, nearly soft, and said,
"You win."
"A bet's a bet." Simple words, but oh, they were heavy with mountain. And now, let me make one thing clear before your head gets racing. This wasn't marriage the way you dream. It wasn't love, or rings or wedding vows. No, sir, this was respect, partnership, two men finding common ground on the shattered path of pride, and establishing something with themselves and everyone around them to watch. Henry didn't offer romance that day. He offered something more. A vow to stand shoulder to shoulder, to create something greater than either of them had ever imagined, and to never again underestimate a man. And you know what they did next? They sealed the vow the old-fashioned way, with a handshake. There in the Texas sun, their palms touched, hard and unyielding, like two men penning history without a stroke of a pen. That was no handshake of flesh and blood. No, it was a connection between two worlds, the refined city engineer and the small-town mechanic, now held together by something more binding than any agreement. And things were never quite the same after that day. Henry and Jacob didn't merely make good on their promise, they built an empire upon it. They took that small garage and made it into a powerhouse, a company that toughened trucks sturdier than steel and friendships stronger than pride. Town folks, they gossiped. Some chuckled, saying, "Can you believe it all began as a joke?" Others applauded, beaming that they had been witness to something extraordinary, a connection born out of respect, not competition. And let me tell you, after that, Henry never made fun of a man for his job again. Matter of fact, he became the loudest mouth in the room, praising Jacob, explaining to anyone who would hear, "That man taught me the best lesson of my life." And what was that lesson? That real worth isn't measured in money, or titles or fancy diplomas. It's measured in character, in the strength to keep going when the world doubts you, in the humility to admit when you're wrong. So let me ask you, would you believe me if I told you that what started as a laugh turned into a lifelong bond? That one busted engine ended up being the cornerstone of trust, respect, and success that continued for decades. Because that's the way it is, my friend. And here's the part that always makes me grin whenever I remember it. Every year thereafter, on the same day that Henry made the wager, those two gentlemen would sit in that very store, shake hands and laugh. Not the bitter cackle of scorn, but the warm, hearty laugh of two friends who knew they'd been privy to something greater than themselves. And isn't that something worth recalling? That occasionally the path to respect begins with a step of pride. A vow no one ever forgets. Did you ever hear a story so good that it lingers with you long after the end? This is one of those stories, the kind that makes us remember what character, tenacity, and respect can accomplish when life surprises you with a challenge you are not expecting. Years passed after that iconic handshake in a small Texas store, and oh how things changed. That dirty old garage that used to reek of oil and sweat was the basis for something nobody in that town would have ever dreamed. Henry and Jacob no longer repaired engines, they constructed dreams, brick by brick, truck by truck. Their company expanded, gradually at first, then rapidly. Before they knew it, they were operating one of the largest automobile companies in the whole state. Henry contributed his engineering genius, and Jacob contributed the type of expertise that can't be learned in any schoolroom, the type of expertise gained from working with your hands for years, listening to engines' language, and never giving up until the work is complete. They forged machines stronger than steel, trucks that could drive any road, and a bond that could survive any storm. People often asked, curious and wide-eyed, how did it all begin? And every single time, Henry would lean back, let out a slow laugh, say with a twinkle in his eye, with a laugh I'll never forget. Those words carried more meaning than most folks realized. And Jacob, he'd simply nod, a small smile on his face, his hands still rock steady as the day he first turned that recalcitrant bolt, his heart still humble as if they'd done nothing more than succeed at building a birdhouse. Because here's the truth, success never changed him, it merely made him thankful, and that's something to remember, isn't it? Now let me ask you, what's the true lesson in all of this? Is it a bet that was too much? Is it a broken engine coming back to life? Or is it something more? I'm going to tell you what I think. The lesson here is easy but strong. Never look down upon a person because of where he or she is from, or because of how he makes his living. Because skill, character, and determination, they can turn the impossible into history. And if you ever need a reminder, just remember Jacob. The man who took what the world termed junk and gave it life. Remember Henry, the man who learned that respect is more valuable than pride, and how one thoughtless guffaw, one daring wager, made two strangers partners, and partners brothers. And you know why? That wager didn't simply alter two lives, it created something greater than either ever imagined. Because when pride yields to respect, and respect turns to trust, there is no end to what might be constructed. Not simply companies, not simply engines, but legacies. So the next time you notice a person and think they don't add up, pause and recall this tale. Because in life, the engine that seems dead sometimes just needs someone to restore it back to life. And perhaps, those people are the one you least expect. Now let me leave you with this question. How many great stories begin with doubt? How many victories are they born of laughter? More than you know, my friend. And this one is proof. You know, tales such as this remind us of something we tend to forget in the bustle of life, that greatness isn't necessarily loud, and strength in its true form isn't necessarily one that's accompanied by title. At times it is also found in calloused hands, in silence, and in promises fulfilled when no one's looking. We all have our moments when someone underestimates us, when the world itself seems to question what we can do. And in those moments, what truly matters isn't about proving them wrong. It's proving to ourselves that we can stand up, that we can keep moving, even when the odds appear impossible. Perhaps that's the lesson here. Never measure someone by what you see on the surface, because under the dust, the grease, or the laughter of doubt, there's usually a heart full of grit and dreams holding out for their moment to shine. And occasionally the smallest bet, the quietest handshake, will alter not only a day, but a lifetime. So my friend, as you step back into your own story, ask yourself, what's your engine, and what will you do to get it running again?